Hey, Liam here from Digiwaza Multimedia with another tutorial in Blender 2.82 at this point. In this episode, we're going to be modeling a very basic cell phone stand that is 3D printable. So I'm not going to cover the 3D printing part in this. This will just be the modeling within Blender. So it's a good basic modeling project for newer users and for anybody out there who may have a 3D printer that they're printing stuff on. So let's get to it. I'm going to hit Tab to go into edit mode. And then let's hit SZ just to shrink this cube down just a little bit. I'm not going to be exact on the dimensions here. It's up to you. What looks good to you is good enough for me. All right, so let's grab Edge Select mode right here, or we can also hit number 2 on our top of our keyboard. I'm going to select this back edge here, and then I'm going to hit GZ to lift it up. Okay, so now what we're creating right now is the angle on which our cell phone is going to rest. So I'm going to turn on my gizmo. You can click it right here. And I'm going to pull this up just a little more. So this is the angle we want our phone to sit at. Let me get this a little closer up front. This is the angle we want our phone to sit at. So you decide, again, it's up to you if you want your phone to lay more flat or be more upright. That's just however you're going to do it. I'm going to probably make it like this. I found a relatively steep angle works pretty good. So something like that. Okay, cool. Now I'm going to hit face select mode, and you can also hit 3 on the top of your keyboard. If we select this front face here, and we're going to extrude it out just slightly along the Y. So EY, and that'll bring it out just a little bit. This is going to be the little foot that our phone is going to rest on. I'm going to bring that out just a little bit like so, and that looks pretty good. Okay, so now what I want to do is we want to match this foot to this angle here. So I'm going to hit Tab to go into object mode, Alt-A to deselect this object, Shift-A to add a cube. Now, again, I'm going to turn my gizmo on for the cube. I find it easier to move a little more precisely this way. I'm going to hit 3 to go into side view, and then let's move this cube right over here so that its lower corner, get in closer so we can see what's happening. This lower corner is going to meet right here, so I'm going to just bring this down just a little bit. It doesn't have to be perfect, somewhere in here. Okay, and now we want to rotate the cube on the x-axis. That's the axis we're looking right down. So if we hit RX, and then if I hold down the Shift key and then move these double arrows in a circular pattern like a windshield wiper, we'll see that I have a slow control. I want this cube's edge to be parallel with the cell phone stand. If we bring this in just a little bit, we'll see that it is definitely not. So we'll need to rotate again. RX, hold the Shift key down, and then move the arrows around in a circle around the origin point till we get it right. So somewhere in here, looks pretty good. I'm going to move this over just a little bit, and then let's bring this up and try to get these two places to mate together. All right, cool. So we're really just using this cube as kind of a gauge. All right, now we can select our cell phone stand. Kind of turn it at an angle here a little bit so we can see the front edge. Let's hit Tab to go into edit mode. We're going to need Edge Select. We're going to grab this top edge right here. You can see it right here. This one right across the front is the one we want. I'm going to hit 3 on the numpad, and then let's just drag this up. Something like so. And just match it up. That gives us the proper angle right here. If we hit Tab to go into object mode, select the cube, we can now delete it. Okay, cool. All right, so now we're ready to pull this front face out, so we have to select this object, hit Tab to go into edit mode, go to face select, or number 3 on the top of your keyboard, left click this front face here. Let's get in just a little closer so we can see what's going on, and then we're going to extrude this out just a little bit, and it's going to be extruded on the Y, so that's EY. We're going to pull that out just a little bit, something like that. We don't need much of a foot there. All right, that looks pretty good. Okay, so now we're going to go back into side view by hitting 3 on our numpad. And I should have actually selected. We have to be in edge select because I want to grab this bottom edge now. Now we can go with 3 on our numpad. And I'm going to bring this out at an angle. And I want to try to match this angle with this angle. So it goes out pretty far. So just keep going until it looks good. It doesn't have to be absolutely perfect, but somewhere like that. And we want this angle to be not too straight up and down because we're going to put some stuff on the front there that's going to require 3D printing at some point. So we don't want to have too steep of angles. All right, cool. So we have the base of our phone stand built. One more thing, let's hit face select up here, or number 3 on the top of your keyboard, and we can left click this back face, and let's extrude it out one time. So it's along the Y, as you can see on this green line. So let's hit EY, and we're just going to pull this out just slightly. We don't need too much there. Something like that. All right, that looks pretty good. Okay, so the way this phone stand is going to operate is our phone is going to sit in this cradle. Now the power cord comes in the bottom of the phone, so it's going to have a hole through here that the power cord can go. So the power cord is going to come out through the bottom here, and then it's going to run out the back of our cell phone stand. So we're actually going to cut a channel all the way through here. So let's go kind of from the front. If we hover towards the top part of this edge or this edge, either one, it doesn't really matter, we can simply hit Control R and we'll make an edge loop. If we scroll wheel once forward, we'll get 2 edge loops. And then we're going to left click, left click. That'll leave that new cut right where it needs to be. And then we need one more cut right here. So let's hover right in this zone near this edge and hit Control R. Left click, and then if we only left click once, if you're new, this allows us to edge slide. So I'm going to bring this right up here, somewhere around here. And then left click. Okay, cool. So now we need to select all the faces that's on that channel. So we can either hit 3 on the top of our keyboard. That'll take us into face select, or again, you can hit it right here. Now I'm going to select this face right in the middle here. And then if I hold down the Control key, I can just go right up that line to the top and click it, and I'll get that selection as well. I can also just come around the back, hold down the Control key, and it'll click the next one. The Control select allows us to select between multiple faces or vertices or edges. So we can select a whole line of them starting at one point and then clicking on another by holding Control down. Now, what it does is it sends it on the shortest path between the 2 points. So it may not do what you want it to sometimes. So, but on a simple example like this, it works great. Again, I can hit Control and left click here. Oh, no, I guess I have to hold Shift and select that one there. And then you can come all the way to this one right here, hold down Control and left click. Okay, so just to recap, we only want it up to this little tiny line here that we have, this little section of faces here. So from the front all the way through. Once we have that, then let's hit X and delete faces. All right, cool. So now we have this cutout through our whole object. So now we have to come back and fill those faces in. So we're going to go into vertex mode by hitting this vertex select here. And I want to get an angle that allows me to see down in here. The ones I want is this one, this one, this one, and this one. These vertices I want to fill in as a face. So I want to select each one. So I'll left click this one, and then I have to hold down the Shift key to select the rest of them. And then we can just get in there, and if we hit F, it'll fill that face in. Okay, so then we want to see these other ones kind of from the side. They're hard to see. I'm going to grab this one, Shift this one, and this one, and then we're going to hit F to fill that face in. We're going to turn slightly over here this way. We're going to grab this one, this one, this one, and this one, and then we're going to hit F to fill that face in. Okay, and now we're going to go again. I'm going to back out just slightly so I can see it. Let's see. We want to hit. Okay, yeah, they're hard to see sometimes. So I want this one, this one, this one, and then I have to back out a little bit to see this one way down at the bottom. I'll get a little closer. So this one. And then we'll hit F to fill that in, and we just filled that whole face in. And now we have one more quad to fill in. This one, this one, this one, and this one, and then we can hit F to fill that in. Now we have to do the other side, so we have to see our view here. This one, this one, this one, and this one, and then we can hit fill to fill that in. This one, this one, this one, and this one. And we can hit fill to fill that in. Okay, so we've just filled that entire thing in. It's looking pretty good. So let me back out and we'll get a spin around. So here's what our phone stand looks like so far. It's looking pretty good. By the way, if you messed up or if you're just experimenting and you put a bunch of more edge loops in here and then you found yourself in a position where you can't model in quads. In Blender, Blender really likes you to model in quads or 4 vertices, 4 edges, and 1 face. That's what it likes the best. However, for 3D modeling, I find that both Cura and the MakerBot proprietary slicers, they do not require that you have quads. So if you have to fill these big spaces in with an n-gon or a triangle, it's okay for the 3D printing process. Now, as you know, in the rendering, in the render engines here in Blender, you may get problems if you model with triangles and n-gons in the wrong place. But for 3D printing, it doesn't seem to be that big of a problem. Okay, cool. So let's hit Tab to go into object mode. And then I want to bevel all these edges. And so we're going to do that real quickly by coming over here to the Modifiers tab, clicking it, Add Modifier, and then we're going to add in the Bevel modifier. All right, we see right off the bat, it makes a pretty heavy bevel here. So we want to go to this one right here in our control panel where it says Offset. And I'm going to hold down the Shift key and hover over the numbers and then left click, and then I'm going to move this down to a smaller number. Somewhere in there so we don't have too much of a bevel. Okay, and then the next place we want to go in here is we want to come down to the one that says segments. So right here it says segments. I'm just going to click the arrow next to the 1 a couple times till it says 3. We want 3 segments. Okay, and that's all we have to do here. I'm just going to go ahead and apply that by hitting this apply key. All right, if we tab into edit mode, we can see that it actually created new geometry for us. And it beveled our edges, so it looks a little smoother. So that's pretty cool. All right, so let's hit tab. All right, so the next thing that we want to do is we want to add some cool details to the front here. So I'm going to hide this cell phone stand. We can do it 2 ways. We can hit H and it hides, and we can hit Alt H and it comes back. Or we can come up here in our scene collection organizer with this object, which is just called cube right now. I can just hit this I, so that hides it. Okay, so let's hit Shift A and let's add a text. So the text comes in flat, as you can see. I'm going to turn it right side up or standing up by rotating it on the x-axis. Excuse me. So that looks like this, RX90. I'm going to left click, and I'm just going to bring this over here. Okay, so we have our text in, and now once we've selected a text or added a text object, if we come into our control panel over here, we can see now we have this green A. That's the icon for the controls for our text. So if we click on it, we get it all here. The one we want first is geometry. So if we click on geometry, we want to come to this one that says extrude. I want to just hover over the number, left click, and drag it out a little bit. We don't need it to be too thick. About this is good. Again, we don't have to be precise, but we don't want it too thick or we risk possibly messing up our Boolean operation. So let's just leave it like this. Okay, cool. So let's make it say something. The way we do that is we tab into edit mode. We'll get this familiar text tool here. We can just hit backspace. And then I'm going to put in, let's see, BLENDER, and I'm going to put in Blender. So that looks pretty good. All right, so we've got our text built, and we have our what we want to say. And so now let's tab into object mode. And if we come down here to the one that says font, you can click that, and then we can go into this one that says regular, and we come to this file folder. If we left click it, it'll give us access to all the fonts that are in our operating system. So I'm using Windows 10 Pro, so you may not have some of these fonts if you're just using the regular version. I'm going to come down to the one down here a ways, it's kind of a cool looking one, and it makes a good tutorial. It may be a little complex for 3D printing in some applications, depending on how accurate your 3D printer is. I'm going to pick this one that says Joker Man, and then I'm going to open the font. And we can see that you get this cool font here. Now again, this is pretty detailed. You might want to go with a more simplified text or font. That way your 3D printer, if it's not very accurate, will still be able to do it. I've had pretty good luck with this on my machine after getting all the settings all right, but otherwise you might want to go with something simple. All right, so we have our text now, we have our font, we have everything built. So one last thing about this text. When text comes into Blender, it's actually a curve, not a mesh, and we need it to be a mesh. Luckily, they made it very easy in this version of Blender to simply right-click and convert to mesh. Okay, so now it is a mesh. So what I'm going to do now is we're going to bring back our phone stand. We can come up here to our cube and turn the eye on, and there it is. All right, now I need to bring the text out in front of the object of our phone stand, and now I'm going to go into front view by hitting number 1 on the numpad. Okay, so now we can actually drag this over, and we're going to have to scale it. So as I scale, it's going to go towards this origin point, and that's okay. We're just going to have to reassess. All right, so let's scale it, bring it down something like that. Then I can just move it over, and that looks like about where I want it. All right, so I'm going to bring this towards the top. Okay, and now if I go into side view by hitting 3 on the numpad, I'm going to try to take this origin point of our letters, which is dead in the middle, and I'm going to bring it right to the edge here. So let's just drag it right over here, like so, till it's right about on the edge. I'm going to get in closer here so we can see what's going on. Okay, so we're looking straight down the x-axis. So I want to rotate on the x, and so I'm going to give myself a little room with my cursor, and we're going to hit R, X. Then I'm going to hold the Shift key down, and then I'm going to circle this cursor around the object with my mouse, and it'll give us that. It's almost like cranking a windshield, or in the old days when you'd use a handle to roll down a window. Nowadays, that's not really the case anymore. All right, so I want this face of these letters to be parallel with the face of our phone stand. And it looks like I have to go a little bit further, so R, X, hold the Shift key down, and we'll get that fine control. And so something like that looks pretty good. All right, I'm going to bring this in a little more because we don't want the letters sticking out too far. So I'm going to bring this in just a little bit, like so. Okay. All right, so we have our letters embedded in the phone stand. So now let's join the letters and the phone stand through a Boolean modifier. If I select the phone stand, come right over here to modifiers, add modifier, Boolean. I'm going to select the color picker in this box right here by left-clicking it, and then we just left-click on the letters. It should say text in this box right here. Right now it's set to difference, which would cut the object out, but we want it to join to it, so we're going to change this one to union. And then I'm going to apply. Before I apply, I know a lot of people will say, well, why don't you change its view and like wireframe, and why don't you just turn it off up here so you can see and test it out first? And you could do that, but in this case, if you're following along, this works really good, so I'm just going to apply it. Okay, so now if I select the letters, I got to go up here and select text. Sometimes you can select it here, or if you can't, you just go up in this organizer and select it here. And now if I pull this out of the way, we see that we've added that to our text. And before I delete that, if I select this phone stand, tab into edit mode, and then hit Z to go into wireframe, we can see that it actually added it right to our mesh. Pretty cool and fast. All right, so Z to go back into solid, and then tab to go back into object mode. I'm going to grab this text here and delete it. X, delete. Okay, cool. So one more thing I'd like to add on here is a star. Now, in order to get the star, you have to go up here to Edit, Preferences, Add-ons, and then if you type in Extra, you can see that we get these options. We want this one that says add mesh extra objects, and just make sure it's checked, and then you're good to go. All right, so then I can hit Shift A, mesh, and I can come down here to extras. And oh, it's not in extras. Where is it? Oh yeah, here it is right here in extras, simple star. All right, so we got this simple star here. I'm gonna, again, hide our phone stand by left clicking it, and I'm just gonna hit H. All right, so let's make this star just a little bit better looking. I'm gonna get here and let's select it. Let's hit Shift D, and then I'm gonna lift that object. Oh, Control Z, sorry about that. Let's lift that up. Control Z. All right, one more time. Shift D to duplicate the object, left click once, and then just pull this other star up. And then we're going to scale it down, something like this. And then I'm going to bring this star into the other one. You can see that it's inside the other star, which looks pretty good. All right, now if I take this star and we add a modifier, we add the Boolean, and then we grab the color picker, select the second star, and then we want to leave it at difference. And then if we hit apply, we can grab the top star, move it out of the way, and we've made a cutout in this other star. So that looks pretty neat. So I'm going to grab this star and delete it by hitting X and delete. Okay, cool. So let's Alt H to bring back our phone stand. I'm going to select the star again, and then let's bring it out in front. And then I'm going to turn it upright on its side like it's supposed to be by rotating it on the X-axis. So RX90 gets us that. Let's hit 1 on the numpad so we can go into front view. And I want to rotate this star so this point's pointing straight up. And that's on the Y-axis. So RY, we can turn that till it looks pretty straight. And we can just line it up with that blue line there. Something like that. It doesn't have to be perfect. Get it as close as you can. Okay, now I'm going to hit 3 on the numpad, and then I'm going to scale this star down, of course. And then let's do the same thing we did before. We're going to use this origin point as the center line on our letters, and we're just going to drag it in. And I'm going to drag it in until it gets halfway, right about there. Okay, now let's use our rotational trick by hitting RX, holding the Shift key down, and then using our windshield or our car window thing that we were talking about, a handle. They don't use them anymore, so I'm kind of telling you how old I am. All right, cool. So we need the front of this star to be parallel, again, with the phone stand. And then I'm going to drag this in just a little bit because we want our star to stick out just a little bit. Now let's check to make sure that our cutout is not going inside either. All right, so something like that. We can even probably go a little bit further, just drag it in. All right, so that looks pretty good. Okay, so the next step is to add this star to our mesh. So again, we're going to left click our mesh, our phone stand, come to our modifiers tab, add modifier, Boolean, grab our color picker with a left click, and then we're going to select the star. And then we're going to come over here to union, or change it to union, and then we're going to apply that. And then we're going to select our star. We may have to select it up here, and then when we move it out of the way, now we have that star there, and that looks pretty good. It's not too bad. All right, so I'm going to delete the star, X, delete, and then let's build a little bit of a concept video or a visualization video for this as the capper. So before we do that, though, we have to give this a material. So if I come up here, let's open up a shader editor. And this N menu, it goes away by hitting N. And by the way, if you're new, it toggles, and it's context related to whatever window or editor it's in. So let's hit N to get rid of it. We'll select our phone stand, and we can see we already have a material here. All right, so real quick, let's build a material. I'm going to go over here and hit Z to go into rendered mode. And I'm going to bring this light forward. So GY. It's good to see it here. And then I'm going to move it over here a little bit. Something like that. Maybe a little bit more on the Y this way. Okay, and then let's adjust our camera real quick. So I'm going to grab my camera and let's drag it down just a little bit. And then let's look through our camera by hitting 0 on the numpad. And I can hit RR to free rotate it. And then I'm going to hit GZ to go up. And I probably need to bring it over here just a little more. It's a little, takes a little time to set this up. RR to free rotate again. And then GZ to bring this down. And then I'm going to probably have to back out. And so to back out or dolly out, we can hit GZZ. And that'll allow us to move our mouse to back our camera out. All right, so something like that looks pretty good. Let's bring this up as close as we can. All right, so let's select our phone stand and let's start working on the material. We're going to make a basic kind of 3D printed looking material. So Shift A, input, ambient occlusion, Shift A, converter, color ramp. I'm going to go color to this factor and then out of the color ramp, color to base color. All right, before ambient occlusion and those kind of things will work, we have to come over to the Eevee render engine settings. This one right here. I'm going to click ambient occlusion, screen space reflections. I'm going to go into shadows. Let's change the cube map size to 1024. And then let's pick high bit depth. Okay, so now we can pick the color for our cube. So I'm going to pick the color first here by selecting the white on this color ramp. Get its color picker, and let's turn this to, say, orange. Kind of a safety orange color. I've been enjoying that color a lot lately. Okay, and then let's change the color of the ambient occlusion by bringing its value slider up. Let's also pick an orange, like so. And then we can make that just a little darker maybe. Okay, and then if we turn the slider, or not turn it, if we move it, we'll get kind of a little bit more here for our money. All right, so I'm going to leave it probably right over here. We can see that it's given us some ambient occlusion. If we want, we can also come over here to our ambient occlusion settings, click this arrow, and we could set the distance up a little more, and we'll get a little more ambient occlusion. You can really see it back here in between these two in this cutout. If I turn it all the way down low, you can see it's pretty bright in there. And if I turn it up a bit, you can see it starts getting darker. Okay, so you decide what you want. Ambient occlusion is one of those things where you don't really want to use too much. Okay, cool. So things are looking pretty good. One other thing that I want to change here too is I want to come out, we can just come up here and select our light. And if we come down into our control panel, we can get this light icon. I'm going to change the color of the light just slightly. Just barely down in the yellow-orange there. And then we'll come to shadows down here and click this open. And then I'm going to change this bias all the way down as far as it goes, 0.001. I'm not going to add contact shadows here. If we get in here, it does do stuff, but it sometimes does weird things, so I don't use it very much. Okay, cool. So we have our phone stand set up. It's looking pretty good. Let's continue on the material. If I left click, we're back to the material. I want to add a little bit of a texture that makes it look kind of like a 3D printed object. So if we hit Shift A, let's add in a texture. Let's add in a wave texture. And then Shift A, vector, bump. I didn't really have to move that all the way over there, but okay, so color to height, and then bump goes into the normal. And we see we get this pretty wonky looking thing here. It's kind of unusual, but let's grab onto this wave texture, and then I'm going to hit Control T using the Node Wrangler. Again, if you don't have the Node Wrangler add-on yet, you can just go right up to Edit, go to Preferences, go to Add-ons, and just punch in Node, and then put a check in the box, and you'll have it. If you want it to be permanent, go down in the lower left corner of that box to the little paragraph-looking thing, and click it open, and save user preferences, and it'll be in Blender every time you turn it on in a new file. I highly suggest it. It's a great add-on. Okay, cool. So let's make this look better here. So I'm going to go down here into the rotation. And the rotation on the X, I'm going to make this go down into the minus, I think it's around the 55 zone. All we're trying to do is make these lines be parallel with the bottom of this object. So just that's all we're worried about right now. So get that on the side parallel to where it looks good. We can see these lines are running parallel with what we want. Now if we come down to the Z, we can move this one down minus as well. And we can see that we're looking pretty good there. All right, now we have to go back up to the X here and try to get these to be more parallel too. It's back to parallel. You'll have to mess with it or something. I find that that's somewhere in the 55 and 45 zone. It's dependent on the angle that you made your phone stand. Okay, so these look good. They're running across the front parallel with the bottom of the front, and they're running across the bottom parallel with the bottom. That's all we're really concerned with. So you'll have to mess with the rotation on the X and Z in this mapping node in order to get that to happen. And a good place to start is in the minus 50-ish for the X and minus 45 in the Z. Okay, cool. So that looks terrible still. So you have to come over here to the bump, the wave texture scale, and then we're going to turn this scale way up. Just keep on trucking until you think it looks good. It depends on the layer heights in your printing settings. So for me, around 100 looks pretty good. And we'll just leave it there. Now we can actually see that we have these little lines here that start to look like 3D printing lines. Maybe we'll go a little more. Something like that. Okay, so now as we look close, we can see that we actually have what looks like 3D printing lines, but the bump is too strong. So let's come over here to the bump node, and let's turn its strength down. Turn it down quite a bit. Somewhere, I don't know, that looks pretty good right there. At 0.225 is what I have it set to. And you can see now, we can still see all those little lines here, and it looks pretty good. It's not perfect everywhere, but you could even omit this. If you're just doing a visualization, people will get the idea without you putting this texture on it. I just think it looks kind of neat. All right, so there we are. We've got our material made. We've kind of got a scene set up here. I'm going to come over here to the roughness of the phone stand, and I'm going to make it just a little shinier. Something like that. Looks pretty good. Okay, so we're starting to get a material that looks pretty fair. We can also kick in just a touch of subsurface scatter. So if we kick that up just a little bit, and then let's make it an orangey yellow color, something like that. We can get just a little bit goes a long ways to making our object look more like plastic. All right, so that's the basic material that we're going to go with. So for the rest of our scene, what we're going to do is we're going to Alt-A to deselect our phone stand. I'm going to hit Shift-A, and let's hit a mesh plane. And then let's hit S30. So it's really big. All right, and then we're going to rotate it on the Z, RZ. So it just looks like a background back there. And you can see it kind of blends into the background, so we're going to leave it just like that. We do, however, have to move it down because it's cutting off our phone stand. So let's bring it down using this blue arrow, or on the Z, you could use GZ as your command. All right, and we'll bring it right back up till it's right there. We don't want it to be sitting too close. It's a little finicky sometimes. Helps to get in there kind of close. And I find that if you hold the Shift key when you're using the Z here, for some reason it doesn't work. It wants to move the plane backwards. So that's kind of an unusual anomaly. Okay, so there's what our phone stand scene looks like so far. So it's looking pretty fair. Let's work on the material for the ground. If we come up here in our shader editor and hit New with the plane selected, we'll get our new material. All right, so again, I'm going to hit Shift-A, Input, Ambient Occlusion, and then I'm going to hit Shift-A, Converter, Color Ramp. We're going to plug the color into the factor, and the color into the base color just like we did before. Okay, now this allows us to kick up the ambient occlusion on the ground, which will give us a little bit of a, more crisp shadow zone right here. All right, cool, that looks pretty good. I'm not going to give the ground any textures, but we are going to take the roughness down. And we may have to change the color of the ground just a little bit, just to get that to show up a little more. So I'm going to grab this and let's just pull it down a little more into the gray. And as we do that, we see that we get a little more of the reflection on the ground there. All right, I'm going to turn the roughness up just a little bit. I don't really want to see the details of this stuff. It seems like the way this is reflecting isn't probably all the way physically correct looking, because I don't know if it would really be reflecting with total clarity what's on the front here. So let's just leave it here where it's kind of blurred out. All right, so that looks pretty good. What we're going to do is we're going to create a empty. So we're going to hit Shift A, and we're going to hit an empty, plane axis empty. I'm going to bring this forward, and then I'm going to bring this right up here. What I want is I want blender, the word blender, to always be the part that's most in focus. Okay, so now we can hit our camera. You can either select it by hitting the rectangle that is our camera view, or you can hit camera up here in our organizer. And then when we have our camera selected, we'll get this camera icon. If we left click it, we can come down here where it says depth of field. And then if we hit the arrow next to it, we'll get some controls. In this box, focus on object, I just want to select that box and pick the empty. Okay, now I'm going to come down here to the f-stops, and I'm going to bring this up a little bit so we can see to make sure that nothing weird is happening. So we're basically going to create our focal plane, which will allow everything that's outside that focal plane to be slightly blurred. So if we come down to f-stops here, hover over the numbers here, left click and drag this down a bit. See, at 0.1, it blurs out everything but blender, and we don't want that. So let's back it off a little bit, say to 1 or so. 1 looks good to me. Okay, and that kind of blurs out our background and gives us a little bit more, I don't know, kind of makes it look a little more realistic when you have that kind of a f-stop bokeh kind of in the background. I think they call that bokeh. All right, so we've got that going for us. Okay, so now let's set up for our animation. I'm going to add another empty. So I'm going to Alt-A to make sure nothing's selected. And then I'm going to hit Shift-A, again, empty, plane axis. I'm going to leave this one right where it is, right in the middle there. Or maybe we can lift it up just a little bit. We want it to stay kind of in the middle of the object. Okay, so now I'm going to select my camera up here in my organizer first. And then I'm going to select that empty, which is empty 0.001. And I have to hit Control here to get them both. So now I have them both selected. You can see the camera is the orange, the empty is yellow because it's the last object selected, which makes it the active object. So now if I hover in this window, we can hit Control and P, and we can set the parent to that object, the empty object, and keep the transformation. Okay, so now with that empty selected, we can see that we have the camera is parented by its little object here. If we hit RZ, while that empty is selected, we can see our camera now rotate around. So that looks pretty cool. Okay, so we're ready to move on to the next part where we actually animate our camera. So let's select that empty, make sure that's the one that's selected. I'm going to open the timeline just a little more, pop it up. We're on frame 1. We want everything to be where we want it to be. So I'm going to take the empty and I'm going to hit GX, and we'll move it over here just a little bit. And then maybe GY, just a little bit, something like that. And this is where we want this empty in relationship to our camera to be on frame 1. If we hover in here, we can just hit I. And then I'm going to leave one for location, a keyframe. I'm going to grab the scrubber here, this blue scrubber, and drag it all the way to frame 250. Okay, and now I'm going to move the empty again. I'm going to move it on the X, GX, over here like so. And then I'm going to move it on the Y, GY, so it's back just a little bit like so. Something like that. And now let's hit I and leave a location. Now let's go back with the scrubber all the way to frame 1, where we have this other keyframe. And let's hit I, and let's pick rotation. If we move our scrubber all the way back to 250, like so, and then we hit RZ, then we'll be able to rotate it around kind of like this, so we get a little bit more of a front view. All right, cool. And then let's leave a keyframe, I, for rotation. All right, if we come down to our playhead here, we can go back to the beginning of the video, push play, and we'll see we get this slow rotation as the camera moves up, and it shows our object, our cell phone stand. I always call it an object, but okay, so that looks pretty good. Okay, so a couple more things before we get going here. Let's come back over here to the Eevee render and make sure we have everything set. I'm going to set the render samples up to about 130. Everything else here looks good. We set our ambient occlusion already. We've got our bloom, or no bloom on, ambient occlusion, screen space reflections. Our shadows, we added our cube size 1024, high bit depth shadows. And then let's go down to color management real quick. If we click on it, let's pick look, none. Let's make it medium contrast. That's probably what it's at already, but okay. And then I'm not going to use curves on this one, so let's just close that up. Okay, so the next thing we need to do before we render the video is we need to go to this one right here, which is the output properties. If we left click that one, looks like a little printer. I'm going to shoot this at 24 frames per second. And then I'm going to come down here to file format. I want this to come out as an AVI JPEG. So if we click right here, we can pick AVI JPEG. And I think I said it in another video. If it's a really, really long render in cycles or something like that, you're going to want to leave it at PNG and film it as a PNG image sequence and then piece it back together afterwards. That way if power goes out or something like that, you don't lose your whole video file. All right, and one last place we have to go to right here is this output. I'm going to click on that, and then mine's on my desktop. And the one I'm looking for is this one called cell phone stand, and then accept and accept. All right, so that's going to send that to the folder of my choice. You put it wherever you want. I just have it on my desktop for right now, just for this tutorial. In fact, I work off my desktop a lot. Okay, so everything's ready to rock. So let's see how this renders out as an animation. If we come right up here, render animation. And we'll see that it's rendering out pretty fast. On my computer, it's rendering just over a second a frame. It's basically 9, 10, 11, 12. You get the point. It's rendering super fast. So for visualization of products or something you may have made or trying to show people to get them interested in, the Eevee render engine is super cool for that. You can get lightning fast renders, so it's pretty cool. All right, I'll show the finished video at the end. I thank you for watching this video. I hope you learned a lot. It's just been a very basic introduction to modeling in Blender, as well as creating possibly a real product in the real world on your 3D printer. Anyways, I'll see you in the next tutorial. Thanks for watching.